Hello friends, welcome to today's book discussion at the Pune International Center Policy Research Think Tank. I'm Abhay Vaidya, Director PIC. We are deeply honored to have with us the legendary Dr. Ashok Ganguly, former chairman of India's largest fast-moving consumer goods company, Hindustan Unilever Limited, and one of the greatest thought leaders of post-independent India amongst us. Dr. Ganguly's autobiography, AFTERNESS, Home and Away, was published very recently. He will be in conversation with Pune International Center's president, Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar. In the chair, we have with us Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Vice President, PIC. This is a rare event at the PIC because all the three speakers are recipients of India's second highest honor, the Padma Vibhushan. Dr. Ganguly worked with Unilever for 35 years and was the longest serving chairman of HLL from 1980 to 1990. He has been on the boards of leading corporates like ICI India, British Airways, Wipro, Tata AIG Life Insurance, Hemogenomics, and First Source Solutions. Born in Patna, he spent his early years in Bombay, now Mumbai, and after BSc from Jai Hind College, did his MS and PhD from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Dr. Ganguly has received a number of top national and international honors. Padma Bhushan in 1987, the CBE, the highest order of the British Empire, in 2006, and the Padma Vibhushan in 2008. He served as a member of the Rajya Sabha from 2009 to 2015. Dr. Ganguly was elected Fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry in 1991, and in 1996, he was made Honorary Professor by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Shanghai. Dr. Ganguly has been a member of the Science Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India, UK Advisory Board of Research Councils, Prime Minister's Council on Trade and Industry, Investment Commission of India, India-USA CEO Council, and the National Knowledge Commission. Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar, who will be in conversation with Dr. Ganguly, has been honored with 45 honorary doctorates, and he is an eminent scientist. He was formerly DG of CSIR, President of INSA, and Chairman of National Innovation Foundation. In the chair, we have with us Dr. Vijay Kelkar, former Finance Secretary, former Petroleum Secretary, and Chairman of the 13th Finance Commission. He is Vice President of PIC. We will first have the opening remarks by Dr. Kelkar, followed by a brief introduction to the book by Dr. Ganguly, and then a conversation between Dr. Ganguly and Dr. Mashelkar. Today's program has a Q&A segment, and you are welcome to post your questions in the question box. May I now request Dr. Kelkar to kindly take the floor.
Yeah. Ashok, Dr. Mashelkar, Gopal Krishnan and friends, I'm going to make only a couple of points, minutes, and first is about rules of games this evening. I would think that Ashok would like to introduce the book for just few comments, and then we can have Q&A. I heard about Ashok when I was in Planning Commission many moons ago, when Vasan Adhaksha was that time working with the Planning Commission. That's how first time I heard about him. And then, of course, other glowing testimony he received was my first boss in the Planning Commission, Lavraj Kumar. So, and over time, of course, I got to know him a little bit. But the most frequent meetings I used to have with him and his very charming wife, when we used to walk on, bump into each other on worldly seafares. And I'll just only one story still I remember vividly about Ashok telling me about his father when he was knighted. I mean, he just thought of his father, just could not accept it because my father was a freedom fighter. He would have never would have tolerated me into his house after we're taking his knighthood. I thought it's really captured what he is and his commitment to our country. He's really, really one of the most remarkable men of our modern India, makers of modern India. So, with his very, very brief remarks, I'll first invite Ashok and then let the Jugalbandi start.
Yeah.
Well, Ramesh, would you like me to speak now?
Yeah. I will do that, and then we can get into the book. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. First of all, Ashok, thank you for doing us the honor. Pune International Center, we feel very privileged, very honored that you gave us a chance to talk about your fantastic book. And I say fantastic because I have read from page 1 to 285, by the way, the entire book. It's a really amazing book. I wanted to say a few personal words. The formal introduction has been done by Abhay. Ashok has been a very, very, very dear friend, my guru, my guide, my friend for almost 35 years. In fact, I met Ashok for the first time when we both were members of Science Advisory Committee to the Prime Minister in Mr. Rajiv Gandhi's time. And, you know, like a magnetic attraction, I remember Ashok always sitting next to you. And probably it was to get influence, your some touchstone, you know, by which I will become like you. I learned from you, and I learned enormously by just sitting, listening to you, looking at your interventions, insights, and it was amazing. I think the audience will be amused to hear that Professor Sena Rao, you know, he is now the Bharat Ratna and most decorated scientist of the country. He was the chairman, and I remember Ashok, let's say we were making a presentation to Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi in the afternoon, and Professor Rao will go through the presentation. And as you know, he was so passionate about science, he would always say, this is not happening, that's not happening. And we used to always advise him, start with positive, then put whatever you then end with positive, and so on and so forth. So I can't imagine, you know, the number of things I learned from you. Personally, for me, you know, as I said, you had enormous influence. One thing I recall is I remember giving the P.V. Dancourt's Memorial Lecture in London. You always challenged. I remember you couldn't attend the lecture, but you were gracious enough to come all the way and ask me, Ramesh, you are going to give 1 hour lecture. Tell me about the lecture in 1 sentence. That was a great challenge. My lecture was Borderless Chemical Engineering Science, Emerging Paradigm. I was talking about breaking borders. And I say it is all about learning to dare and daring to learn. Instantly, you got a response from me. And equally importantly, when you read the lecture, you said, don't give the principles, practice it. Just don't preach. And I'll give you a platform. And you gave Unilever as a platform where those ideas, you know, could be tested out, and whatever one suggested, one actually got done. You have had influence in other ways. When I decided to accept the position of Director General of CSR, I remember meeting you, and you said, Ramesh, don't sit like a bureaucrat there. Be the CEO of CSR Incorporated, you know, doing research in a business-like manner and business-oriented and so on and so forth. And that was responsible for what I did later. So you have a big role to play in my life. We worked together on several other things like ICICI and Knowledge Park. I remember you, then myself and Wagul were the founder directors, and we created that platform. I remember being with you on the Microsoft India Advisory Board. Ashok was also there, C.K. Prahlad and Wagul, etc. And one thing I found about you was that you will hear and see what others were saying or hearing, but you will always see something which none of us could basically see. I've been, of course, associated with Hindustan Lever. You were kind enough to invite me to the board on which I was there for a long time. So saw that great organization, the way it works, etc. So I'm very grateful to you for, you know, my guru, guide, friend, and philosopher. So with that opening, may we start with the book itself. And if I may just ask you, this fantastic book, this AFTERNESS, Home and Away, The very title is intriguing, Afterness. Because if you type Afterness on my iPad, I get an error signal because Google doesn't recognize it, you know. So what is the meaning? It's an intriguing word. And what is it that inspired you to write about the book? What was the trigger?
Well, it is start off as a book, as I've shared with you, Ramesh. I used to write chapters without planning. While my wife and I, after I retired from Unilever, used to spend some time every summer. And if the summer weather was good, I'd sit down with my notebook and write about various parts and stories about the family. Basically, saying to myself that I will make a few bound copies for my grandchildren. They ought to know where the grandparents came from. And eventually, it built up into a number of chapters, and Gopal Krishnan is primarily responsible for encouraging me. Encouraging me is possibly far more mild than what Gopal has this persuasiveness. You asked what afterness means. You know what forgetfulness means, what persuasiveness means. I must admit that afterness, I read that term in some book many, many years ago, and it stuck to my mind. And what I tried to do was to write the story of things that had happened. And that is the origin of the term afterness.
Oh, all right. Yes. No, very, very sort of interesting. So let me start by getting into your early childhood. Ashok, I must say right away that yours is one of the most honest and reflective biographies that I've read, honestly. And you admitted all your failures bluntly, in absolute blunt words, by the way. No, not mincing any word. For instance, your childhood. On page 31, you talk so openly about your very poor school record. You're ruining the fact that you belong to the almost the bottom of the class in terms of your academic performance, the marks you got, the hard spanking that you used to get from your mother, Ma, the caning that you received from the principal, your failure at the first SSC exam, your escapades from home, etc. You have explained it all. And yet you performed brilliantly. Indeed, reached very dizzy heights when you went for higher education, especially when you did your doctoral research in University of Illinois. So can you explain to us this mystery? What changed? And, you know, I'm very interested in this. We are all very interested in this for the following reason. You can see today's children, for example. What I want to know is that, are there any generic lessons to our society, especially for our parents, who place such high emphasis on exams and marks and put our children under such enormous stress? It is almost a cruelty, all right? So what does it all mean by just looking at your example, you know?
Yeah, I thought a lot about it many years ago. And there's one thing which I've written about, which I should have maybe emphasized a little more. You know, from the infant class to my failure in matric and thereafter, my father kept on private tutors, this, that, and all. But in retrospect, I cannot remember even a moment when he expressed any disappointment at my consistent underperformance. And that is a spectacular thing. You know, parents, my mother was like any other mother. What, you're not studying, you're holding your book upside down, blah, blah, blah. Couple of strokes. But the part of the fact is that, you know, I was never discouraged because my parents, many parents, as you said, want to achieve through their siblings what they wanted to achieve. And they create this enormous pressure, good schools beyond their capacity, many, many things. We know all about it in our society. My mother wanted me to study. My father never expressed any disappointment with all my escapades, my complete negative attitude. So that is a very critical issue. Why, after my supplementary exam in matric and after we finished SSC, the teachers in my college, to which you also attended, Jain College, were outstanding uniformly. As a matter of fact, because their college was just starting, they wanted to make their presence felt. And for some reason, there was a transformation in me which I cannot explain. The very first year, I got the Rotary Scholarship. And then they chose us for special tutoring by the teachers themselves, the professors.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got ranks in the university. So that was the transformation that I have not been able to explain. There comes in life, when you come to a path where there are two ways. Either you remain on the path that you have been following, or you take a path which turns out to be a miracle.
Yeah, yeah. No, very, very well put, Ashok. I think there's a lot of learning from this fascinating part of your book, by the way. And that runs as a beautiful narrative, looking back, I must say. Let me jump a few steps and come straight away to the fact that you joined Hindustan Lever, which was a multinational company. You worked all your life there till it became HUL, Hindustan Lever. So let me talk about working for and running a multinational company in India then and now. As you say in your book, in 50s and 60s, 1950s and 60s, the multinationals running a business in India were considered the relics of the British Raj. And draconian legislations like MRTP Act, FERA, DGTD were instruments to not only discourage foreigners from investing in India, but also to keep a close watch and restrict multinational business from operating in India. So how did you, in those difficult times, how did you navigate this hurdle race? How did you manage the so-called relations with Delhi, as we call it? And what were your own trials and tribulations? And then triumphs. You also refer, interestingly, on the triumphs that you in your book. And has the situation changed now as we seek exponential rise in FDI with the geopolitical shift, particularly due to China factor and so on? So then and now, multinational company and your leadership. Yeah.
No, the point is very simple. Joining Hindustan Lever was an accident. I came to India as a pool officer, but I had a job in the University of Washington, which I was going to go back to. I did not go back to it, and I've written about it. I don't want to repeat it. But Hindustan Lever also started as a scientist, or junior scientist. And then not long after, I was seconded to Holland. I was seconded to United States. And my research career really took off. And I was very happy that I was not being curbed. But then you know that I moved to manufacturing after that. The whole point was that my decision not to return to United States was because I saw my parents aging. And I decided to fulfill my emotional needs to remain in India rather than go back. And then the rest of the story is very well known, that I went to manufacturing and so on and so forth. So again, these are all, when you come to that split on the path that you're traveling, the decision which path to take and what the outcome is clear in retrospect. But in afterness, it seems quite different.
Yeah, you're right. By the way, you mentioned about the pool officers, pool officership. It was the CSIR who was running that officership. So I think we have a distant connection even before we met. Your CSR pool officership is one, because that's the only job I've done in my life, as you know. And the other one was Jain College. I was also a student of Jain College.
I know.
So there is some way or the other this deep connection.
We have been connected long before we knew we were connected.
Yeah, that's correct. So let me move to something else which is close to your heart, my heart, and I think the readers will also like to know. And that is research and development. As you said, you joined as a junior scientist in R&D in Hindustan Lever, and then went on to become director of R&D in Unilever, handling billions of dollar budget. And actually, I remember your book, Business Driven R&D, Managing Knowledge to Create Wealth. It's really a masterpiece book. Now, you make a comment on page 206 that you discovered that in late 1990s, there was a very limited interest in Indian private sector business in research, barring, of course, a few exceptions. And later on the next page 207, you also say that sadly, innovation and R&D in India are not much different compared to when you started your professional career. There is some sort of a disappointment that you express. And you're right, I can back it up by quantitative figures because, you know, our investment in science and technology has remained at around 0.7% for the last 30 years. We have been consistent on that. That's a very low investment. But out of that, the investment by industry has remained around 30% of the total, whereas the developed world has 70%. The ratios are reversed there. Why is that so? And what do you think we should be doing, Ashok?
You say, I have a hypothesis, which is possibly very controversial. The government attitude to multinationals as the dregs of colonialism was a great benefit to the Indian businesses because they did not have, competition was abhorrent. And therefore, their interest in R&D was also not there, other than Cipla and a few other companies, SIBA and Hindustan Lever and a few others. So the investment or original thinking, patents, respect for patents, etc., as long as it was kept out, and George Fernandez became a hero after throwing Coca-Cola out as if it was throwing the Chinese out of our borders. You know, their monopoly was very comfortable to enriching a few at the cost of many. That's why there was no interest in R&D. That knot was broken by the IT industry in the 90s. And IT grew in India almost by stealth.
Yeah.
So it's a fairly logical thing that why you want to keep competition out.
Yeah, got it. But you know, when you talk about IT industry, software, and now the digital world, the things seem to be changing so dramatically. You refer to it in our book. You know, it was interesting. We talk about startups. We used to have our friend Wagul created this TDICI venture capital company. I was on the board, I remember. The Kiran Muzumdars of the world got support and they became billionaires later, etc. But interestingly, until 2016-17, we used to have one unicorn. That means $1 billion market cap, one unicorn per year. 2021, we had almost one unicorn per week, 42, 52. And, you know, the interesting part about this is that when I did an analysis, I found 50% of them came from IITs, IIMs, elite institutions, but 50% of them actually came from tier 3 cities, tier 2 cities, dropouts. So this is almost democratization of wealth. I mean, we are still talking about innovation in the form of the startups coming up. So this is a wonderful change that you also referred to. Isn't that so? And isn't that what gives us the hope, the youth of this country?
No, that change has now taken hold, I think permanently, although we are not seeing its impact as yet. And mind you, Ramesh, there is another thing which is possibly worth exploring a little bit. that a majority of the unicorns are descendants of trading ancestry.
Ah, yeah, interesting.
It's
Interesting.
worth exploring that.
Yeah, that's right. And, my further analysis has shown that most of them are B2C, not B2B, not B2B2C, and very few of them are sort of deep tech. So we have a long way to go. That's a different matter. But
Right.
yeah, as you and I are dangerous optimists, whenever there are bright spots, we sort of share that joy. Let me get back to science technology for a while. Both of us were member of Science Advisory Committee to the Prime Minister in Rajiv Gandhi's time. And Ashok, you and I will remember the last meeting at 7 Racecourse Road that Rajiv Gandhi had. And following day, the elections were declared. We did not know that. So it turned out to be the last meeting. We did not know. Now, in that, there was one interesting conversation. Rajiv Gandhi said we should raise our investment in R&D to 2% of GDP. We were then 0.7%. And you remember T.N. Session was the cabinet secretary. And in his usual style, he says, we have no money. And I remember Rajiv saying that, and very politely,
It was always
very politely, Seshanji, science, technology, innovation, without that, there is no future for India. And I will set aside 2%, basically, for science and technology. And of course, that was not to be, because later on, as you know, we lost him, he was killed and so on. But in your book, you talk about number of personalities, and one of them is Rajiv, and you are personally very close to him. So would you sort of say a few things about what are your recollections about him, not being a scientist, but promoting science, scientific temperament, where does country stand today, etc. But mainly about Rajiv.
No, I think, you see, I personally came closest to any politician was Rajiv. And I knew him only slightly when he was an Indian Airlines pilot. And I think he was thrown on the learning curve reluctantly. I mean, he did not want to enter politics. His brother's accidental death that brought him there. But he caught up quite fast. He saw the issues quite clearly. But I don't think that he had an understanding, which came as a shock to him, about the intrigues. And whom do you trust? Whom do you depend upon? I think that really was a great setback to him. Great setback to him. But he was very clear that there has to be an upheaval in the system in order to change. And he was not going to live to see that. That's it. But that he was, in a way, somewhat naive in his trust of people. I remember that a state election was lost. I was supposed to have a cup of tea with him the next morning. I phoned his secretary. I said, can you somehow, cancel that appointment? I don't want to see the Prime Minister. He said, no, but he wants to see you. So I went. And he asked me one question. He said, Ashok, in your company, if somebody lies to you, what do you do? I said, I first give him a warning. If he lies again, I sack him. And he looked for a long time and he said, I can't do that in government.
Yeah.
So I got a bit carried away, but I was very close to him. And
Yeah. No, that gets beautifully reflected in the book. It's very interesting. And also Sam Pitroda, the technology missions, etc., that were driven at that time. The formation of CDAC, CDOT, etc., were very important milestones as we sort of remember. Let me come to something else. in your mentorship, one of the great things you did, let me recollect that and then ask you a question. I became the Director General of CSIR, and then this was July 1st, 1995. And within less than a month, I was in London because Unilever and Royal Society used to have that scientific symposium jointly. You had started that. I remember that. And I was giving some plenary or something like that. And I remember you are meeting me for the first time. I had taken over as DG of CSR. You shook hands and you asked me a question which startled me. You know what you asked me? You said, Ramesh, have you found your successor? I was startled. I said, be kind to me. I just joined one month ago. And I remember you were saying at that time, Ramesh, that is how you will be judged, how you find your successor. Now, when it comes to leadership, you yourself, of course, have been an iconic leader, but you describe in your book in great detail as to how your own journey from a junior scientist to the chairman of HLL happened, as also the top leadership position that you held in Unilever. And I have this book, the CEO Factory. You have seen that book? Yes. And this is by Sudhir Sitapati. And he talks about HUL as a CEO factory. And it is about some powerful ingredients that sculpted the few hundred CEOs that came out of HLL and then HUL. And of course, you yourself played a huge leadership role in building this CEO factory. So my question to you is, what is the magic sauce behind this phenomenon? How you created that factory which kept on providing leaders to India?
Satpathy wanted me to launch his book, which I agreed because the Hindustan Lever chairman suggested. I did not like that headline. Human beings cannot be treated like raw materials.
Yeah.
And the point is that I think within, say, 2 to 4 years, people learned that the only reason they are working for Hindustan Lever because there is a uncompromising commitment to meritocracy. Nothing else counts. So many people who left and became CEOs in other places, many of them, not all of them, many of them were not going to get anywhere with the Hindustan Lever, honestly. Some of them were good. And therefore, the brand name Hindustan Lever and being a senior manager, you were an attractive raw material for a lot of companies. But to call it a factory would give it a mechanical twist where the human soul is missing. And that is not what Hindustan Lever was, is, or will be.
No, I totally agree because I sat on the board and I knew how you looked at human resource and its development and the entire humanistic approach. It was incredible. No, I have seen that. So I share your sentiment about the factory part of it. It cannot be an assembly line.
And the point is, it's amazing how many young people today want to plan their future without realizing that somebody else will be planning and plotting your future.
Correct.
And you better look after the leaders who report to you, build them up, build the raw material up.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I have a follow-up question on that, and that has to do with the following. We look at multinationals, basically, and then we look at national interests and so on and so forth. And we always feel there is a conflict. But there is this puzzle, and that is about the chairman of Hindustan Lever. Vasant Rajadhyaksha, as Vijay was mentioning a little earlier, became the vice chairman of Planning Commission, right? Government, of course, after he left. Prakash Tandon became the chairman of State Trading Corporation, right? Of course, after he left. And you served, while you were in position as chairman of Hindustan Lever, as a member of Science Advisory Committee to the Prime Minister. This has happened sort of all the time. So how could, the obvious question, a common sense question, how could you manage the duality of national interest and multinational interests as a sort of a...
I tell you, Mrs. Gandhi, Indira and Nurul Hassan, whom you will remember. Nurul
Yeah,
Hassan, you remember Nurul Hassan, Ramesh?
yeah.
And first they were trying to persuade me to join the council, the advisory board of the council or whatever it was called. And then I joined Mrs. Gandhi, MGK Menon, Ramalinga Swamy, Sathe, and Henry Tiwari as the council of CSIR. I was a member of that also, which I have written about. I was brought up in a genetic pool where Prakash Tandon defined that since there is an anti-multinational feeling, you cannot hide behind anything. You must talk to the government and find out what is it that they are thinking and why are they thinking. And you must bear your heart of how you are running the company as a professional to them. So I did not start it. It was Prakash Tandon who first planted the seeds of being open with the government, so that the government gradually feels open with you. And it comes out in the surface. Vasant Rajadaksha did that, following Prakash Tandon. T. Thomas did that. I did it. My successors continuing to do it. Tell the government what you are engaged in before the rumor mills start feeding them something else.
Got it. I fully understand, and that's a very important part of your book, by the way. Let's turn to something else, because you are such a multidimensional personality. See, you had avoided being drawn to politics all your life. You had been requested to join the Congress party. You said no. You are asked to consider ambassadorship to a major Western country. You said no. You are asked to become a member of the Planning Commission. You said no. You are asked to contest the general election. You said no. And then you say in your book that when the offer to become a member of Rajya Sabha, it seemed to be comparably benign, to use your words. I'm quoting you. So you accepted the nomination. But then you say that your tenure in Rajya Sabha confirmed that your lifelong feeling not to join politics was right. So can you tell us why?
No, because, Ramesh, you would know, Vijay would know, Gopal would know that you are good at certain things, you are not good at certain things. And I knew that I would be a complete failure if I joined politics, if I became a minister or an ambassador or whatever it is, because that was not my strength. Now, were you sort of slightly thrilled at least that by the offer? As late as when I'd retired and everything, an emissary came in the second UPA to say that, have I changed my mind? I said, not in this lifetime. And I've written about that also, possibly. I said, not in this. I knew that that was not something I wanted to do. That I was very clear of.
Yeah, got it. But just to continue, you make a mention of your disappointment about frequent adjournments of Rajya Sabha. And you also mentioned in your book about your conversation with Mr. Arun Jaitley and his interesting response. And you quote him that the role of the opposition is to oppose. And his advice to you that you are straight into citadel of Indian politics, which is best avoided by a professional like you. So seriously, Ashok, if this is the case, what is the use of these institutions which are supposed to uphold the democracy? Would you like to comment on the current state of affairs? Have they become better? Have they become worse? Some reflection from your journey, on.
So, Ramesh, I can't now recall, but I must have returned that there were some debates, discussion, for example, women's reservation. For example, I had raised an issue on creating an Indian Institute for Mental Health, in addition to the Indian Medical Association. And so some debates were outstandingly good. But the insecurity of end of term And is there a life after 5 years in Lok Sabha and 6 years in Rajya Sabha? Create such pressures that you and I will not understand with our professional careers. And that transforms people into peculiar individuals.
Mm.
They are very bright, they are very committed, but what is the longevity?
Mm.
That is a deeply worrying thing. Now, when the BJP came to power and Arun Jaitley became the leader of the opposition, and when I was giving my farewell speech, I said, the honorable leader of the House, Arun Jaitley ji, you will remember the advice and comments you told me about when I was bewildered by the frequent shutting down of the Rajya Sabha. And now that you sit as the leader of this House, I imagine that you expect no better, no less. And he acknowledged.
Oh, wow. Wow.
He raised his hand. So they it's a different kind of individual who thrives. And there are some outstanding politicians.
Yeah. That's right.
You and I are not suited for it.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. So we talk about people that you have met in the book, and very fascinating. And of course, we talked about Rajiv, and you have met many people in your life, from Queen Elizabeth to presidents to prime ministers. You refer to them. But one of the most poignant memory that you share is the way your life changed after you met Mother Teresa. And if I quote you, one of my most stunning and deeply transformative experiences was our visit to Mother Teresa, to a corrugated tin roof shelter with open sides, occupying a broad sidewalk near Selda station, a daycare shelter for the children of beggars flying in and around the Selda station. And then you also describe how a dying child in your hand passed away in your life. Can you just share that with us? This is very, very...
You see, but totally accidental. My chairman here, Mr. Thomas, asked me, I was the general manager in Calcutta. He said, Ashok, have you heard of Mother Teresa? I said, no. So I said, but let me find out. And so we searched and found out Mother Teresa with my colleague, Chandi Basu, who was the branch manager in Calcutta. And she came, this little woman came with a blue bordered sari, and she said, what can I do for you? So I said, I work for Hindustan River. My chairman wants to know what you do. She said, you have got some time today? I said, yes. And then she took me around. And the house of the dying, then the shelter, then the leprosy home, and all what she was doing. But that incident on that corrugated corner for beggars' children, in which that child died in my house, in my arms. And she said, smile at her, Dr. Ganguly, because that is the last memory she will carry with herself when she passes on.
Oh, wow.
I could not resist my tears. And that was a transformational moment for me.
Sure.
And eventually of Connie, my wife.
Yeah. I realize that. Talking about Connie, let's move to the family. You have been very generous in giving the glimpse of your wonderful family, your Ma, Baba, Tai, your lovely daughters, Nivedita and Amrita, whom I had the pleasure of meeting and interacting. And you dedicated your final chapter to Connie. It's a very, very touching. There has been actually an emotional outpouring in that chapter. I know she's no more. She left us just recently. And I know, although she's not there, she's everywhere for you. What is the role? Because, people like you who rise and who have multidimensional activities, pressures, stress, end to end, what is the role that the family has played in your life? Something on that?
My estimate is that 70% of what you end up in life doing is entirely dependent on your home, your wife, your children, your parents, because that is where you spend most of your time.
Correct.
And that is where you do the least of the energy that you spend in the public space.
Yeah.
And as you know, Ramesh, mine was an arranged marriage.
Yeah.
And when an arranged marriage becomes a life of love and affection, it plays the most important role with the freedom, the energy, and the sheer broad view that you get, and you're able to fulfill those. No, I think most people realize, but we cannot express it, that if you did not have your better half, where an arranged marriage becomes a life of love.
Yeah.
Who really looks after you in a manner which is silent, quiet. And the loss becomes apparent only when they move on.
Yeah.
I think if anybody says I did this, it's a complete lie.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yes. Yeah.
The importance of the home, especially in this country.
Yeah.
And the way we openly acknowledge it is, I think, rare in the West.
Yeah, that's correct. I hope lots of young people are sort of listening to you at the moment, who are driven by their careers, and there is a wise advice from you. Thank you so much. We are coming to the end. You and I can go on till midnight, but we have to come to the end. So there are just two questions, and then I will open it up. I think we have talked about everything: industry, politics, science, technology, family, everything. Now let's come to India, and we'll finish on that. There are two questions. The first is your concerns for India today. Actually, there is a specific point that I want to take up. You have written a brilliant prologue, and you describe why you are worried about India of today. And again, I will quote you. You say, I harbor a growing sense of disquiet of late, of certain emerging trends. I do not underestimate the damage which attempts to distort India's unity in diversity pose an unlikely and unsustainable proposition. Then you say, I pray for peace and harmony. So you're a worried man. Can you elaborate not only what worries you have, but what we need to do?
Somebody asked me at another event like this, say, when will India be free of poverty and unemployment? So I said, if I look at the last 75 years after independence, when we became a nation, I said anywhere between another 75 years and 100 years, possibly we'll reach a stage. And my unhappiness is really a selfishness, because all human beings want things to happen in their lifetime. And therefore, it is more of a selfish expression. And I'm more at peace as I move on. And I will die in peace and happiness, because I know that people of India are far more sensible than many of us in the public domain.
Yeah, actually, continuing with that, actually on your page 44, you say, and I will quote you again, you say, much has changed, and I'm confident that much more will continue to change under the succeeding young generations in one of the world's most diverse, largest democracies, multiracial, multilingual, multi-religious people, because we are, above all, Indians. That is the sentiment that you give. What is special about Indians, you think?
See, there is no other nation which is so diverse in the world. And there is no other nation. If you ask them what they are, who feel as proud as we do, saying that I'm an Indian.
Yeah.
So we have what the ingredients of greatness, but we do not still have the mixer which will multiply it for all.
Yeah, beautifully put. Ashok, thank you so much for doing us this privilege. Absolutely fascinating. Ladies and gentlemen, this book is a fantastic account of the 80 plus years of an amazing journey of an amazing individual whom you just heard, an iconic individual. It is absolutely unputdownable. It's a must read, and I hope you will enjoy it as much as we all
Thank you.
have sort of read and understood Ashok's
Thank
message. May I pass on to Abhay? I'm sure there will be a number of questions and
Thank you.
queries and so on. So thank you, Ashok.
You have been very kind. You have been very kind.
Thank you.
You're a great man yourself.
Abhay.
Much, Dr. Mashelkar, for this very fascinating and insightful conversation with Dr. Ganguly. We have the questions coming in, and I would like our members of audience to bring in more questions. So, sir, there is this question from Mr. Sushil Bore. He asks that you did not like politics, but you rose to the highest position in the corporate world, which is also fraught with politics. How did you handle that? How did you differentiate the corporate politics from national politics?
Well, corporate politics is a oxymoron. Yes, not that it is not there, but there is a more, the corporation has got boundary lines which is far more manageable than politics has. Therefore, the ability to manage diverse actions and behavior are much more manageable within the boundaries of individual industries than it is possible to manage in the boundaries of either states or in the country. So I mean, that is the difference. That is the difference.
In
My
your
view.
book,
Yeah, Abhay.
yeah, thank you. So in your book, you have mentioned about your visit to China, and you had a banquet meeting with the mayor of Shanghai. And then after some years, after retirement, you again went to China, and it was that person who, that very senior leader who recognized you. And interestingly, you haven't mentioned his name. Any particular reason for that? And could you tell us something more about this
The
visit?
reality
And
is that he is a very senior member of the top leadership of China today. And you will note from my writing that we had a one-to-one conversation of how he changed Shanghai. I have described that. But it would be, I think, unfair. And he never asked me not to mention it. But I decided that knowing what China is, I don't think it would be fair for the man who had a heart to have chat with me that I should name him. He never told me not to name. But he had tears. I mean, when he was describing the plight of people, 50 million at a time being moved to townships and they're part of the city being modernized. It is an unbelievable story.
Yeah.
now that explains, and indeed very kind of you that you didn't mention his name. We have a question from Mr. Sanjay Kanvinde, and he asks, with your exposure to the Chinese ecosystem, how do you compare it to India, and what are the top 3 lessons for India?
See, I think it is an unfair comparison because 95 or 98% of people in China speak one language, follow the same celebrations. So China is a monolithic country in some way other than the Uyghurs and others, Tibetans. and also who are very small in numbers also. India is a multicultural, multi-religion, multi-ethnic, multinational country. You can't expect that to happen here. And we value our democracy, our privacy, our public occasions as states. We value our languages, we value our families in a different way. And every country is different that way. There's a lot to learn from China in certain areas, but there are a lot to learn from India in many areas.
Yeah, very well put. Yeah, but
In your conversation, you spoke of how supportive your father was, and you spoke of the family support and the support of the ecosystem. Mr. Sushil Gori wishes to know what was the one quality that made you successful, although you say that you were really set up for success in your childhood. What is the one quality?
I described that my father I've never heard him say a negative thing during my rather failing childhood, young days in school and others. They never expressed any disappointment. But more than that, I think his ability to help others, his broad-mindedness, and several other qualities which were not that he did not have failings either. I think you will not be a normal human being if you don't have your failings. He had his failings, but those failings become apparent as you grow to be a young man, then a middle-aged person while your father is still living. But the basic qualities, and I never understood, for example, I've written in my book that when I was invited to the Unilever board, he only asked me one question. And my wife and I went to touch my parents' feet and tell them that I've got this new job. He said, "Why do you want to work for the British?" So he must have had something in his mind from his young days. But he was a man of very few words. So Vijay, I was very saddened because my mother always gave me a private promotion beyond what I'd been promoted to. She announced that if I become a manager, I become a general manager to her, and so on and so forth. But my father would never talk about it except that particular day.
wow. Wonderful. Wonderful.
No, and as Ramesh and I were talking, please don't underestimate the family background, the genes that you inherit, the home that you are brought up as a middle-class Indian, the lack of frippery and excessiveness in anything, they build your character of
Wow.
what you eventually become.
Wonderful. Wonderfully put.
Ramesh, you know that from your own experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect.
So, friends, I think all good things unfortunately come to an end, and we have to now wind up. So I'll make only my concluding remarks, Ashok. What your father was the way he interacted. I recall, I don't know, you might have known the story, what happened between IG Patel and his father. IG was finance secretary. He was going for meeting to Paris for a consortium. And he came home he said, I had to catch night flight. My father was there, and his father asked, "Where are you going?" So he said, "We are going for this meeting." And he was so upset. We didn't fight for independence just to beg money from this foreigner. So exactly your father's reaction was same, Don, that how can you work for those? And I remember you telling me that he would have very upset if you had taken knighthood. So this is a generation which really fought and they thought it. And I just said, my father never forgave me for begging. He tried to explain to him balance of payment problem, but he just would not understand this. How can you? How can you? So maybe that sort of may give you some clue. But before I conclude, because Lata was also listening.
Vijay, I want to say one thing.
Yeah,
May I say just one thing?
yeah, please.
My father had told me something which I may not have written as clearly.
Yeah,
At some point in my life, in my young days, it was in school. He said that for 2 chapatis and dal, never bend down in front of anybody.
yeah, exactly. I can fully. This I'm sure I.G. Patel's father told him the same thing that I was begging. Other Lata is listening to this beautiful conversation. She wanted me to tell you. You might have forgotten about it, but I'm going to tell our colleagues who are listening. Myself and Lata feel most honored and privileged that Ashok invited us for a private concert, and where we heard Kaushiki first time. Kaushiki is classical singing. You may have forgotten about it, but it was such a beautiful gesture you did, and that was one of the most sort of precious gift we had in our stay of Mumbai. Mumbai was not, and she said that she wants to tell you herself and how great it was.
The only regret is that you didn't call us again. Namaskar. But that has stood in our memory. Yes,
Yeah.
very fond memory. But we wish.
Very, very nice to see you.
So, on this note, if it's everything okay with you all, unfortunately, we had to conclude our today's session, and I would join Ramesh to request everybody to go and buy the book, because this is an extraordinary man, his extraordinary life, and these are the makers of modern India. And we should not understand. If we want to understand India, we don't understand people like Ashok. So Ashok, thank you very much once again for spending a whole 1 hour with us and trying to take through this very, very. So I join everybody, give him our hand. And hopefully we can persuade you to come to visit. I don't know whether Ramesh told you a fantastic story, news. So now PIC has got our own land and we will have our own campus. So you have to come and visit. Pune International Center. Pune International Center. So that's one more incentive for you to come and visit us.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Albert.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ashok. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Just a minute. I would just like to thank Dr. Kelkar, Dr. Ganguly, and Dr. Mashelkar for this lovely conversation. And I would like to thank Mr. Gopal Krishnan and members of our audience for taking time out and for being a part of this conversation and for the questions which enriched this discussion. Before closing, I would like to mention that our next program is on November 14th from 4:30 to 6 p.m. And this is in Marathi under our Pune Samvad segment in association with Bukle Institute. And the topic is Nehru Vichar Manthan, lecture by Justice Narendra Chapalgaonkar, former judge of the Bombay High Court. Dr. Vijay Kelkar will be in the chair, and Advocate Raj Kulkarni will be a discussant in this program. All of you are welcome to attend. With this, I would like to wish everyone a very good evening, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vaidya.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.